8 months ago, Chris Roberts dropped that letter from the chairman, declaring 2025 would be the year of playability for Star Citizen. Fast forward to today, you're still falling through planets, losing cargo to phantom bugs, and watching your ships vanish into the void. The most dependable thing in the Star Citizen universe isn't quantum travel, or even the Carrack. It's the soul-crushing disappointment that follows every patch. So what the hell happened to that promise? This year for Star Citizen was supposed to be different. How many times have we heard that exact line? 14 iterations of the same broken promise, according to veterans who've been counting. Every year brings a new slogan, a new reason to believe, a new excuse for why last year's promises didn't materialize. At some point, you'd think both CIG and the community would learn, but here we are, stuck in this perpetual cycle of hope and letdown that feels more like a toxic relationship than game development. If you've stuck with Star Citizen through the years, you've seen this movie before. That year of playability announcement probably got you doing that thing where you want to believe, but your brain keeps screaming warnings at you. Maybe they'd finally fix the stuff we actually interact with, instead of adding another half-baked planet. After burning nearly a month of free time diving back in, cataloging every bug, crash, and unintended feature to see if anything's actually improved. Well, the truth hurts whether you've been here since the Kickstarter or you're thinking about dropping your first 45 bucks. So what exactly does playability mean in the bizarre parallel universe of Star Citizen? Chris himself said, playability equals performance, stability, and content. Strip away the marketing speak, and that means frames that don't tank every time someone spawns a hammerhead, servers that don't fold like wet cardboard, and stuff to do that actually works. For normal humans playing the game, it means not watching 500,000 worth of cargo vanish because your ship decided to breakdance, missions that don't break halfway through, and basic stuff like elevators. You know, that 1800s technology actually functioning as designed. Most game studios nail this boring foundational crap before adding shiny new toys. CIG, though? They're building the roof while the basement's still flooding, then acting surprised when everything collapses. Nobody talks about the actual measurable performance difference since this playability crusade began. Let's get real. Client-side performance has barely budged. Sure, the patch notes mention optimizations for new Babbage or whatever, but unless you've got a 4090 and the latest CPU, good luck getting consistent frames anywhere that matters. Area 18? Still a slideshow during events. Landing zone approach? Hope you enjoy PowerPoint presentations. That upscaling feature they added was nice, but hardly a game changer. Remember all those jokes about needing 128 gigabytes of RAM to run Star Citizen properly? Here's the kicker. People with monster rigs sporting 192 gigabytes of RAM are still reporting the same bugs as everyone else. Turns out no amount of hardware can fix broken code. Server performance started the year looking almost respectable. Remember those brief magical days of 30 FPS server ticks? Then CIG did what they always do, crammed in that massive Idris, the worm, and whatever else they could think of until the poor server hamsters had heart attacks. You know exactly how it feels. You're carefully lining up that landing at Riker Memorial, and suddenly everything freezes for 3 seconds. When it unfreezes, you're upside down, on fire, and somehow inside the landing pad. That's not a bug. That's just Thursday in the verse. And don't even get me started on load times. Yeah, they're better than the go make a sandwich, eat it, and do your taxes times from early in the year. But they're still brutal by any rational standard. After a death, you're still staring at that medical screen for what feels like an eternity. 30 seconds doesn't sound like much until you're wading through it for the 5th time in an hour because you keep dying to bugs. That's not gameplay, that's purgatory with fancy graphics. Be honest, you know exactly how it goes. Patch drops, you clear your schedule, update the game, sit through that loading screen that lasts longer than some relationships. You're pumped, ready to try whatever new content they've added. 20 minutes later, you're floating in space because your ship decided to quantum straight through a planet, or your cargo disappeared, or your gun stopped firing mid-firefight. That familiar feeling washes over you, that mixture of disappointment and resignation that's become part of the Star Citizen experience. You stare at the screen, wondering why you keep doing this to yourself, then close the game and go play something, anything else, but you'll be back next patch. You always come back. We all do. Server stability has genuinely improved. Credit where it's due. Remember when 30Ks were so common we had drinking games built around them? Now you can actually play for hours without getting booted to the menu. The queue system has cut down on those server-full errors, and partying up with friends works more often than not. Progress is progress, even if it's the bare minimum of what a game should do after more than a decade in development. Meanwhile, one thing remains absolutely rock solid: the ship store. Funny how the part of the game that takes your money works flawlessly 100% of the time. Never seen that crash, have you? But let's talk about that Pyro experience. You spend forever kitting out your constellation, carefully plotting your route through dangerous space, maybe even hiring a friend as escort. You hit that quantum button, watching the fancy new effects, feeling optimistic that this time will be different. Then halfway there, nothing. Ship frozen in quantum. Can't exit, can't self-destruct, can't access Mobiglass. Alt F4 is your only option. When you log back in, you're either dead or spawned back where you started, minus your ship and cargo. 50,000 credits gone because a mechanic that's been in the game since literally day one still breaks randomly. And this happens so often it's become a meme. The transit system is a perfect example of CIG's half-measure approach to fixing things. They made a big deal about self-healing elevators. Cool, great feature. But freight elevators still regularly trap players, glitch out, or just decide not to acknowledge you're standing there mashing the button. 8 months after Chris Roberts declared this the year of playability, and we're still dealing with elevator bugs that have existed since the literal beginning of the game. 10 years, 10 years of broken elevators. Let that sink in. As one commenter perfectly put it, should have gone with escalators. Persistence continues to be the biggest joke in the galaxy. Every single patch, without fail, someone's losing ships, components, or gear they paid actual money for. You'd think a game built around accumulating stuff would prioritize, letting you keep that stuff. Leave your Arasi at a mining outpost. Good luck finding it later. Buy that fancy new sniper rifle. Flip a coin whether it'll still be in your inventory tomorrow. This isn't a minor annoyance. It's a fundamental design failure that's been ignored for years while CIG shows off concept art for inventory systems they admit they're not even working on yet. Remember that hour-long Star Citizen Live where they proudly displayed inventory UI concepts, only to quietly mention at the end that it's not being worked on at the moment? This has been the pattern for literally 4 years, showing the same basic inventory concept art over and over while the actual system remains broken. You've probably lived through this exact nightmare, spending hours setting up for Stormbreaker. You meticulously plan everything, the perfect loadout, friends and support roles, routes memorized, contingencies for every possible outcome. Everything's going perfectly. You've cleared the facility, dodged the security, found the data, and then your character suddenly moonwalks through a solid floor and falls into the endless void beneath the map. Your friends frantically try to help. One even flies all the way back to the nearest city to grab a Cutlass Red, hoping to revive you. But you're trapped between dimensions. After disconnecting and reconnecting, because what else can you do? You're not just dead. You've lost every piece of gear you carefully collected. Your friends try to salvage the mission, but now the objective's glitched out completely. 3 hours of your life, gone. The worst part isn't even the loss. It's that moment when someone in your Discord says, "Star Citizened again," and everyone just laughs knowingly. The bugs aren't bugs anymore. They're features so reliable you can set your watch by them. This happens constantly. One player recently shared how they convinced their group to give Star Citizen another shot after refusing to play since January. Within an hour, one person fell through a Pyro planet. They couldn't get the star map to work for jumps. Inventory showed duplicate items that turned blue when clicked, and another person experienced repeated crashes. Result? The entire group uninstalled the game and moved on, probably for good this time. These aren't isolated incidents, they're the typical Star Citizen experience. Content is where CIG might deserve some actual praise. The missions we have do work more consistently across shards. Party sharing for rewards has improved, making group play feel less like charity work for your friends. The Gilly mission showed at least some understanding that new players shouldn't need a YouTube tutorial just to figure out basic controls. When the content works, it delivers moments you genuinely can't find in other games. Those special moments that keep you coming back despite everything else. But why does CIG insist on building elaborate sand castles on quicksand? Contested zones looked amazing on paper, but in reality, door bugs. Card printers that work about as reliably as Carnival fortune tellers, and enough exploits to make an EVE online player blush. Remember the Hathoror event? Visually stunning, conceptually cool, and practically unplayable. The Align and Mine activities would have been fantastic if NPCs didn't regularly forget they were supposed to be alive, or if the worm actually showed up more than once every 4 attempts. CIG behaves as if Star Citizen is the first computer game ever created, seemingly unaware that basic gameplay mechanics that have been standard in the industry for decades somehow still don't work in their game. The strangest part? Despite all this, you've probably played Star Citizen more this year than ever before. There's a twisted logic to it. When the systems actually connect and function, the game delivers something genuinely special. The Wicklow event, for all its issues, created dynamic player interactions that felt meaningful. Emergent gameplay that wasn't just someone camping the Armistice Zone exit. Moments where you could glimpse what this game could be if the tech debt weren't astronomical. It's that potential that keeps you coming back. Those brief flashes of brilliance amid the chaos. The community's response to this year of playability has been complicated. Spectrum threads stretch into the thousands of comments, with veterans and newcomers alike debating whether we're actually seeing progress or just running in place on a prettier treadmill. Remember Xylo's thread asking about your most frustrating issues? Most of those same problems are still hanging around months later with little acknowledgement. Sending feedback to CIG sometimes feels like shouting into the void, a very expensive, beautifully rendered void. The community has evolved its own bizarre survival mechanisms. Never fly what you can't afford to lose isn't just advice, it's the first commandment of Star Citizen. Veterans have developed elaborate rituals to avoid bugs, like dropping drinks on the ground instead of using the inventory system, or logging out in very specific locations to avoid spawning inside planets. These aren't strategies. They're coping mechanisms for playing a game that seems actively hostile to your enjoyment half the time. When someone in global chat asks, "Is basic feature working today?" and everyone responds with different answers, you know something's fundamentally broken with the experience. Meanwhile, the elephant in the room that nobody at CIG wants to acknowledge. The year of playability was clearly just a soft sell, disguising their real focus, finishing Squadron 42. Despite all promises to the contrary about SQ-42 being feature complete in 2023 and in polishing, they're still diverting the vast majority of resources to that project while the PU gets the leftovers. The persistent universe, the thing most backers actually wanted, remains in this perpetually broken state while CIG chases the dream of a cinematic single-player experience that's been almost ready for the better part of a decade. Some defenders argue that most of this is temporary scaffolding in the live build, and that the main branch is where the heavy lifting will be happening. But as one player rightly pointed out, they should have called it the year of internal playability if that was the case. You can't have it both ways. You can't set expectations about improved playability in the live version while simultaneously claiming all the real work is happening on some mythical branch we never see. If the live experience isn't stable enough for, well, living, then they've clearly failed at whatever they meant by year of playability. So how do you even approach Star Citizen in 2024? First, accept that year of playability was marketing speak for slightly less broken than before. Set goals so modest they're almost impossible to fail. Completing a single delivery mission without bugs is a victory worth celebrating. Trying to play efficiently will only lead to frustration and possibly a broken keyboard. If you're just coming back or starting fresh, pick one loop and learn its particular brand of jank. Combat missions tend to break in less catastrophic ways than trading. Never, ever put all your credits into one cargo run, no matter how tempting those Laurinite profits look. Use the issue council not just to report bugs, but to check if that mission you're about to spend an hour on is completely broken this patch. The community often identifies problems faster than CIG acknowledges them. Global chat is your canary in the coal mine. Most importantly, treat every session like you're gambling. Never put in more time or money than you're willing to lose to a random bug or server hiccup. Star Citizen can deliver breathtaking moments. Threading your ship through a canyon on Daymar while a sunset paints the sky crimson, the tension of a standoff in a derelict ship, the coordination of a successful team operation. But those moments are islands in a sea of frustration. Treat it as an experience rather than a game with reliable progression, and you'll save yourself countless headaches. 8 months into this supposed year of playability, Star Citizen remains what it's always been, a stunningly ambitious project crippled by fundamental technical issues and questionable development priorities. They've improved server stability, sure, and added content that occasionally works as intended. But the core playability issues, the day-to-day friction that makes simply existing in the game a challenge, remain largely unaddressed. What makes this particularly maddening is that these exact issues were what Benoit specifically highlighted in that interview back in February. Remember that? When he said they'd be pulling engineers and programmers off of a lot of the new fancy feature work they've always been on and putting them on less sexy but more quality of life-driven efforts, that they'd focus on rebuilding elevators in transit and fixing issues where your hangar eats your ship and your cargo disappears. 8 months later, and we're still dealing with all of those exact same problems. The core problem isn't that Star Citizen has bugs, every game in development does. It's that after 12 years and nearly $1 billion, closer to $1 billion when you factor in the roughly $150 million from external investors, we're still dealing with the same fundamental issues that plagued the game 5 years ago. It's that basic functions that worked reliably in games from the early 2000s still fail regularly in Star Citizen. It's the cognitive dissonance of hearing year of playability while watching your character fall through a planet for the third time this week. And yet, there's still something about Star Citizen that keeps pulling you back in. That moment when you're flying through the rings of Crusader, or watching your friend's ship come in for a landing on a distant moon, or successfully pulling off a complicated multi-crew operation against all odds. Those moments when everything works and you get a glimpse of what this game could be, what it was promised to be. But 8 months into the year of playability, that hope is wearing thin. The gap between Star Citizen's potential and its reality has never felt wider. The game has never been more beautiful, never had more content, never been more ambitious, and yet the foundation remains as unstable as ever. Each new feature seems to introduce as many problems as it solves. Veterans know the cycle all too well. There's always another promise just over the horizon. Another "this will be the year" moment, waiting to be broken. Another letter from Chris explaining why things aren't quite where they expected but will definitely be better soon. As one commenter put it, "We have financed CR's retirement, not the ultimate space game we all dreamed of." What has your experience with Star Citizen been this year? Has it become more playable for you, or are you still dealing with the same frustrations that have defined the game for years? What would you consider the bare minimum standard for playability in a game that's been in development for this long with this much funding? The conversation about Star Citizen's development continues, but one thing is painfully clear. The year of playability is starting to feel like just another broken promise in a long line of them. As another player so succinctly put it, in 13 years you could travel the world, fall in love, get married, get divorced, beat cancer, even go to Mars, and this game would still be an alpha. At this rate, we're only a decade away from being a decade away from beta, and somehow we'll still be talking about elevator bugs.